me, Dale, where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Winnipeg. I was born and raised there, but most recently I was in Saskatchewan and then came over to Alberta during the whole COVID thing.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've pretty much grown up in Winnipeg?
Yes.
What do you think about Winnipeg? Did you like it?
Well, I mean, it was good when I was growing up as a kid. Summers were good. The lakes were good.
Crash Test Dummies. Come on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good music scene in Winnipeg.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always dug what's come out of Winnipeg. So, what is your background? Where did you go to school? What was your schooling in? That kind of thing.
Well, I went, I'm a mechanical engineering technologist. I got that at South Polytech. I have a Bachelor of Technology in Engineering and Applied Sciences from Memorial University. But I went back to school much later in life. I was a heavy-duty mechanic before that for like about 13 years. And before that, I worked as a healthcare aide for quite a few years. Yeah.
And your degree is in?
Engineering, a Bachelor of Technology with a major of Engineering and Applied Sciences.
And so, over the last, how long has it been now? A year or a year and a half? How long have you been on this particular journey that we're going to delve into?
From just over 4 years.
Over 4 years?
Yes.
And so how did that start?
Well, it started in the spring of 2020 after the first set of lockdowns. And I was going to do some work for some dental clinics in Saskatchewan to help them comply with the reopening procedures. And since I was contracted to do the work, I decided to do that as part of some of the research for my degree program at Memorial University. And when I was looking at the engineering controls that they gave for the dental clinics, which fell under aerosol generating medical procedures, we were looking at the guidelines, and I was like myself, a mechanical engineer who's got like over 25 years experience, and a few other engineering technologists, and we're like, these are not going to work. There's missing information. So we all kind of divvied up the work. I said, I'll look for the guidelines, start asking questions. And so I couldn't get any answers. And when I started to ask for like the reports and the justification for this, and where's the rest of the information, I wasn't getting the right answers, and people were directing me off to other places. And I'm like, I can't use this without that information, right? And it had to deal with the efficiency of a system, which if I didn't know what the efficiency of your HVAC system was, then I could never properly apply the chart, because you don't know what you're doing. You have to know that.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit, because I want to understand this, and of course I want the people to understand what you're saying specifically.
Yes.
So when you took on this new gig at the
dental clinic.
At the dental clinic, part of it was for your thesis?
Well,
like you thought it would be a good idea?
Yes, because I would, you would just assess the guidelines and then assess the technology and sort of propose what you would need, the best technologies for that. And it would be part of what I would be doing anyway. So I was like, well, why not use a real world application for that? It would make it great for research, like a project, right?
Sure. And so what specifically did you look at, or did you find that tweaked your, your senses to see that something wasn't correct? What was the specific part of that?
Well, when you're dealing with any type of system, it always has an efficiency. And there was no efficiency listed. It was listed as perfect conditions, which doesn't ever happen. It's like having your engine that runs at 100% efficiency. That's not even reasonable, because your engine loses heat, right? That's why you need coolant. And so you don't have anything running at 100% efficiency ever. It's just not possible. So when I saw that, I'm like, that's not going to work. So let me get the information regarding the efficiency.
Nothing on Earth runs 100%, not human beings, not nature. What about efficiency was a problem? It seemed to me like people were maybe fudging the numbers or not taking account, or they were told a certain untruth about the fact that this is going to run at 100% efficiency.
Well, this with your ventilation rate, it's about how well air mixes together, right? You can just simply think you have two glasses of water, yellow and blue, and you pour them together to get green, right? And it's how well will that mix together, but with air, because air is like a fluid, but you just can't see it. But there's a lot of things that affect how well it mixes. And so when I actually end up finding out what the actual, the efficiency, they call it a mixing factor, it could change the times by up to 10 times on the chart. So what you thought, like say for example, they give you a chart and say, well, you need to wait 20 minutes between patients, right? Mm-hmm. And then you should be okay if there was somebody who was ill. So if you have poor mixing and you say, you need to multiply that by 5, you actually need 100 minutes. So without having that information, it was impossible for you to actually use this chart to set your system up in any way, right? Because without having that efficiency, you wouldn't know if you're actually mitigating disease. So what ended up happening is say you needed 100 minutes, but you thought it was 20 minutes, so you wait 20 minutes, you put somebody in, you just expose that person to an infectious dose, and the person after that, and the person after that. So what you've just essentially done is that you've created a system that would spread disease rather than mitigate it.
Okay. Was that your initial reason for going in to do the contract, or did you stumble across this?
Well, I stumbled across it after doing the contract because I came in and I said, I can't use this. Where's the rest of the information? And then there wasn't any. And so I had to go and dig myself and went back and found what the original guidelines were that had the correct information, the complete formula to use. And then when I compare them to do it, I'm like, well, that you can't use that, right? Because in engineering, a formula is derived from non-destructive and or destructive testing. So when you see a formula, it's because it replicates something that exists in the real world, right? Not that you create the formula and just theorize something, but it's there to represent something that exists so that you can then calculate, like to size your system and then know that it's going to work beforehand. And then you set it up and then you test it to make sure that it works as it's supposed to, right? Mm-hmm. And then they go through that process of commissioning and so forth. But this wasn't the case. So they gave something that was impossible to work, and then they said, go ahead and use it. And so you would set your system up. It might work, but it may not, right? So you put a bunch of unknown failures into an unknown number of systems that you couldn't account for. Now, this is disastrous. This is like going and not properly doing calculations to build a bridge and just throwing it together and saying, well, we hope it works, and then walking away.
What is so important about air quality?
Well, I mean, how long can you live without air, right? And when you have like a lot of these airborne diseases, they spread through aerosols. And so if you're not properly diluting, because you need to dilute dilution, destruction, and filtration, or how you mitigate aerosolized diseases within the air, within the engineering controls. Mm-hmm. So filtration is not really a big issue because it's like trying to catch water in a sieve. You'll get a couple of droplets, but that's not going to be most of it. So dilution and destruction are going to be the main two things that you're going to use. But when we're in a place like Canada, in the wintertime, well, you're not going to be doing primarily dilution because you're going to be recirculating your air, because the cost of bringing in 100% outdoor air all the time is going to be astronomical. So, so if you're recirculating air without destroying it, then you're just going to be bringing the pathogens back in over and over again, right?
Right. So so now we're kind of getting down to it a little bit. So when you recirculate the air, you're saying, of course, you need to purify it.
Yes.
So that it can go back out. As in its original state or close to its original state.
Well, yes, because if you're bringing that air back in to where you're bringing the patients and it's got pathogens in it, well, you're just going to get the person sick, right?
Of course.
And so they didn't account for any of this stuff. And so this is a disaster waiting to happen, right?
And we're talking about more antiseptic environments than your average house, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, what people understand is that when you use proper HVAC infection controls, that's 90% of your mitigation for an aerosolized pathogen, right? So if you have proper ventilation rates, then the masking mandate wasn't necessary. And then you do everything else standard-wise, they would have never been able to get the vaccine because they would have mitigated it properly. But when you take away 90% of your infection controls and then rely on the last 10% and then you do it wrong, then they can justify doing all these other things. And this is what I looked at and found later on at every stage of the pandemic response, that they deviated from the standard of what worked and went to something that didn't work.
Okay, I want to get there, but I want to go back a little bit.
Yes.
So when you entered this dental office,
Yes.
and when you're talking about 100%, this 100% quotient that you say can't exist,
Yes.
are you talking about that they didn't have any destructive things put in place or any kind of mechanism, and yet somehow their air was purified? So how were they coming to this erroneous 100%?
Well, they just took away that information and they didn't give it to anybody.
What information?
The information about the efficiency. But they didn't give it to the engineers or the technologists. They gave it straight to the dental clinic owners and people who were incompetent to know otherwise, and then just said, go figure it out. And this was after the first round of lockdowns. People were under a lot of duress. And who are you going to call? The plumber at $50 an hour? He says, you don't need an engineer for that. I can just call the salesman. Or are you going to go to the engineer at $200 an hour? When you're losing, like in Saskatchewan on the first set of lockdowns, average business lost $156,000, right? And then we also had evidence of it being implemented wrong. And so we tried to report it, but they wouldn't give the name of obviously the technician because they knew that he was doing something wrong. But then my daughter was actually working at the Saskatchewan hospital, and the engineers in the hospital were doing this wrong. Now that's a huge problem because they know better.
So was it this 100% quotient that you're talking about that they were giving?
They were saying that this worked based on using that chart without actually saying that I can't make this work because I don't know what the efficiency is.
Now we're saying they a lot.
The engineers in the Saskatchewan hospital.
Right. Who was giving them the false information? Who are they that we're talking about?
The Saskatchewan Health Authority.
Okay, so this is important, right?
Yes.
Because we need to know who they are.
Yes.
Right? So the Saskatchewan Health Authority
And the Ministry of Health.
And the Ministry of Health were saying that your intake and your output is 100%.
They're saying, here's the engineering controls, and you go set it up based on this. And the problem is, they're a health authority. They're not an engineering body. They don't have the authority to do that under occupational health and safety laws. That is literally a crime, right?
So that's against the law for them to take on the mantle of this
difficulty. Yes. And I actually went and talked to the Association of Professional Engineers and GH Scientists of Saskatchewan and reported this information, and they threatened me and a corporation that I founded in Saskatchewan regarding this. And then I sent them a letter back saying that your own law says that you have to regulate the profession of engineering in a manner that is consistent with protecting the public interest, and people potentially dying is within the public interest.
So with them not using engineers in respect to coming up with a full dissected report as to how air is manipulated and moved and how clean it is and everything else. By them not using an engineer, they are going against the law. They're breaking the law established in Canada.
Yes. And what they did was they got that information from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. And the issue is that the CDC, they had the correct information, then they altered it. And then they gave it out to the different agencies, like they gave it to the Public Health Agency of Canada, then it went through to all of the different provincial health authorities in Canada through the Public Health Agency of Canada. Now, with the way that they put it together, what you would essentially get is that you could deliver a biological weapon and make it look like a random outbreak. Because you get a bunch of random failures, you wouldn't be able to know where they were, but if you actually knew what you're doing, you could ensure that some places failed. But when you looked at the way that COVID was spreading, you had it tied to poorly ventilated areas, which is consistent. So the better that the better your ventilation rates and the closer you were to, higher efficiency rating, the more likely that your system would work, because a lot of the times you would over-design so that you wouldn't have any issues. And that's what we should do in engineering, because when you're dealing with human beings, you want to err on the side of caution, because you can't fix somebody if they're dead, right?
So the CDC, you said they knew how to do it right.
Yes.
And so they didn't do it right. And in some respect, you're saying that's a willful action. Are you saying that?
Oh, absolutely, 100% it is.
So what I'm wondering is, what does right mean in this case? Like, what would be, if they had the right information, what is the right information? And would part of that have to do with hiring engineers to make sure that everything was tested right and properly and worked efficiently?
Well, if somebody read the because I have inside of my report what they gave out during COVID and what the actual original guidelines look like, and if somebody read and said, it talks about the mixing factor and said it could change the times on the chart by up to 10 times, well, anybody who read that would be like, well, what is this mixing factor? I don't know what it is. Well, who could tell me what that is? That would raise a question in their mind, because they're like, if this can change the times on the chart by up to 10 times, well, I need to know what that is, right? Who would you go to? The plumber would go like, I don't know what that is. You guess you got to call an engineer, right?
Right. And so if they knew that statistic is true, why would then you go to your board of engineers and raise this and then tell you to shut the hell up? Why do you? Because you, obviously an engineer should be part of that process if you have a natural born virus, aerosol, and it needs to be mitigated.
Yes.
And this is your area of expertise,
yes,
in which it's not the CDC's, obviously.
Yes.
Why would they tell you to shut up? Why wouldn't they say, hey man, let's go check these things out. Let's make sure that people are safe. Why not?
Well, I thought that it would be, at first was an error, right? Because I'm like, okay, that might be an oversight. Somebody forgot that. But then when I began to look, I saw that every other jurisdiction was putting out the identical guidelines without the section of the efficiency. That's unreasonable. That is such basic poor engineering practice. You never give someone faulty instructions, right? That is how you get people killed. Like if you set up a piece of machinery and you're trying to get somebody to operate it and there's supposed to be a safety guard there, or you're going to lose your fingers, you're going to make sure that they have that safety guard in place and say, make sure that's operational. Otherwise, you're going to have people losing their fingers all the time, right?
Right.
So they didn't give the proper information for people to make correct decisions, and that should never be done.
Is this an anomaly in this case? Meaning that, you're an engineer, right? And so this isn't the first time you had a gig. You did other work for other institutions. And so as that being the case, wouldn't it have always been your responsibility to do the best thing in every other case?
Of course, and you're obligated to report these things because people could get harmed. right? So when you work in engineering, you have people double and triple checking things like this so that you don't have mistakes going out like this. So this should have never happened, right? Like, and if you had something that you were using that was working, and some people are like, well, oh, they changed the formula. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter, because the mixing properties of air doesn't change. Thermodynamics, I mean, the physical properties of air, it's air. It's got a mixing efficiency. Where is it? You didn't mention it to anybody, right? So with somebody not knowing this, they don't know where to go. And so if you're putting people under duress and expecting them to make correct decisions under duress, you're sadly mistaken. You cannot make proper decisions under duress, especially areas that you know nothing about.
And so, just to answer my question, typically in most other situations prior to 2020,
yes,
you would have people, like, not only would they value your input and that would have to be part of your job or you get fired for doing a shitty job.
Yes.
But they would double check it, they would triple check it, they would make sure that this part of the equation was fully satisfied to the best of human ability.
Yes.
Right. And so this, at 2020, come 2020, this no longer applied. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, and a lot of engineers would then fix it and figure out, like, an engineer or a technologist got this information, a lot of them would just be like, okay, this is missing, go and find it, fix it, and get it going. And that's usually what people would do. But this wasn't given to them. It was given directly to other people who would never be calling those people. So that you're going to, unless you had engineers on your staff that were committed to doing things right, how do you know this is going to get done? It's not, right?
Right, but once again, this would always have been the standard up to 2020. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I could assume that maybe one of the things was, this was a pandemic. It was really quick. You know what I mean? People were freaking out and they didn't know what the hell to do. However, I suppose if I'm going to argue my own point, they already would know what to do because they're professionals and they've done it 1,000 times in the past.
Yes.
So at least in this case of air transfer,
yes,
you would already have professionals like guys like you and people above you
yes,
that know the right thing to do. Would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess the obvious question is, why did that change?
That's a good question, right? Like, I mean, why would you deviate from what was right? Like, when I began to look at, for example, what they used as tabletop exercises or pandemic preparedness, even what they had for the Public Health Agency of Canada, engineers were never in any of the ones that I looked at. And I'm like, when you're preparing for these types of things, and engineering controls are 90% of your any aerosolized pathogen, why are you not consulting with those experts on how to mitigate disease?
Right. Because air is how it's transferred and transmitted.
Yes.
What did they focus on if they didn't focus on the 90%?
They focused on getting to what the doctors were doing and then to the vaccines. And this is where the focus is. And when you look in the hierarchy of controls, vaccines are not even on there because that's not prevention, right?
Right.
Because when you're trying to mitigate risk, you're trying to prevent people from getting diseases or mitigating the spread of an existing pandemic. So you can do a lot of things long before you get to a vaccine that can help control the spread of disease and the transmission of it.
Right. The fact that this protocol should have already been established years prior to this, meaning that whatever needed to be in these hospitals was a program that started far before 2020. Am I correct in that?
Oh yes, they actually made this change quietly after lessons learned from the SARS-CoV-1 outbreak in 2002, right? And so when you begin to sit down and see that the deliberate intent that was done there, because there was a bunch of other things, and I actually got a paper from this to the CDC and the WHO, they started to implement things that they knew were wrong and helped spread disease in 2002, and they implemented and told us to do these things in 2020. And I was like mortified, and like they knew that the lockdowns were disastrous because they saw the effects of some of the lockdowns that they had on small scales in Toronto and in Hong Kong and other places that were affected by this. They were even looking at the issues that they were having with lab leaks and knew that that was a problem from back then and said that they needed to be addressed. And they had ones in Taiwan and in Beijing with some of their virology labs there, and they still did nothing about it. And then when they had the lab leak, as they said, potentially coming to Wuhan, they were like, no, that's not an issue. But they had documentation stating that they knew that this was an issue, and that if it wasn't dealt with, that it would probably happen again.
So you're saying that when the bird flu came out and they understood better what to do, and they initiated protocols for that, those protocols never made it to 2020. So between 2000, what was it,
2002?
Two?
They saw what went wrong and helped spread disease, and those were things that they implemented in 2020, or things that they knew would cause economic harm. They knew that the lockdowns were going to cause economic harm because they did some lockdowns in Hong Kong and they did it on a limited scale in Toronto. And so they saw that there was economic harm, and they knew that there was really no benefit from it, but they did it anyway.
Okay, that's the nefarious part of it.
Yes.
But if there was to be benevolence, and I'm not just saying that there was any, but if there was to be benevolence, then you would take what you learned from 2002 and you would create better structures of air intake and output, and you wouldn't say that something's 100% when it's not.
Yes.
And you would start to maybe put better systems into these sanitized institutions, no?
Yes.
That would seem logical to me. That would seem something that we pay a government to do.
Yes.
What you're saying is that those laws were never instituted to put the most benevolent parts of learning or their education into practice, and instead there were more nefarious things at play.
Yes, instead of implementing the things that they learned to do it properly, they instead went ahead and did things wrong. And with the way the engineering works, it's deliberate intent, right? Like, there's no way that you took something that was complete and then decided to take away a portion of it. And I did Freedom of Information requests for the Ministry of Health in Saskatchewan, and they had nothing to justify it, which is what I suspected, because it was impossible to make it work. But then going ahead and asking for it, because I asked everybody, I'm like, where's the engineering report? Where's the documentation that backs up what you're doing? Because I'm like, this can't work. And I'd like to see how you try to justify this. And of course, as I suspected, there was nothing there. This is why I suspect it was done through the health authority and not through the engineering bodies.
Do you think that the engineering bodies, well, you would think that an engineering body or the head of that thing or the heads of that thing would know that they have all agency toward a say in what is being implemented or what is being discussed or how things are going to work. That would be not only their responsibility, but a government would want their input.
They should have been the first ones to speak up and say, hey, this is not the way to go. First of all, you shouldn't be giving those instructions because you're a health authority. That's our responsibility. And we should be telling the people the right way to do this, right? So every single one of those guys, they're all liable because they should be the ones standing there to make sure that that's done properly. Because if they would never be able to put that kind of information out to the public and tell them that this is the way to go.
I'm confused in this respect. I don't understand how someone that is so vital, or an institution that is so vital to the health and safety of a country, isn't petitioned on on what their actual job is, why they're not commissioned to do the very best job. Why do you think, because you said, you were basically just told to shut up and leave it alone, why wouldn't they value your input and to say, yeah, man, I don't know why we're kicked out of this conversation. I don't know why they're not taking us seriously. Why wouldn't they go that direction? Why the vitriol?
The only logical conclusion that I can come to is that they were intending to spread disease rather than mitigate it. Because if you wanted to get something done, you would go to the right people to get the right input to ensure that the job was done correctly. When you're not going to the right people, you're going to the wrong people to get the job done correctly, and then the right people stay silent while they know you're going to the wrong people. That tells me that either A, you've got collusion, or B, you've got people who are fearful, but either way, the effect is still the same. Somebody wants to ensure that something is being spread, and the people that should be coming forward, they're not. The people that should have been consulted, they were never consulted, and they know this. They're called engineering controls for a reason. You wouldn't come to me for medical advice or, to get heart surgery because I don't know what I'm doing, and I wouldn't do it for you. I'd tell you to go to the people who know what they were doing.
But why do you think that the engineering department or faculty or whatever you want to call them weren't asking those questions too? Like, why the hell aren't we involved? Why? And why are we telling you to shut up rather than to speak up?
I would say that there's some corruption within the leadership. I mean, from the response of the engineering bodies, I would say 100% is corruption because, in fact, I have all 13 of the engineering bodies in Canada coming after me in the intellectual property office for something that should be under the domain of the Canada Business Corporation Act to try to come after me for exposing this because they could never openly attack me for exposing something that constitutes extremely poor engineering practice.
Okay, well, I could ask why again, but you said it's corrupt.
Yes.
So I guess one either has to accept that it's corrupt or one is left with no answer.
Well, when you sit down and see, like I'd say, for example, if you had 100 teachers in 100 jurisdictions in Canada, United States, marking 2 + 2 = 5, you're going to have to say that's impossible. You might get a couple, right? Somebody wasn't paying attention here or there, and most of them would mark it correctly, right? But when you get 100 people in 100 different jurisdictions doing the same mistake, that's impossible. It is. But when I sit down and I look at all these different jurisdictions making the identical mistake, that tells me that this is impossible. And the way that engineering works, this is something where they check things thoroughly. How is it that you can sit down and say that you're going to allow this huge flaw to get through in every jurisdiction? It's not possible, right? So this is telling me that there's some deliberate intent somewhere. I can't sit down and say exactly who, but somebody's putting some deliberate intent and somebody else is going along. People are staying quiet, whatever the case. I've talked with people, they say that yes, and engineers saying, yes, this is what I'm doing is correct, what they're doing is wrong. I actually had one of the meetings here and they said, if you're having issues with the health authorities, keep going. But some, I guess, up in the leadership are not of the same mindset. Kind of like we're having the same issues with the government, right?
Right. It's not like I don't understand human proclivity.
Yes.
I understand that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolute.
Yes.
I understand those things. And so, once again, if you're going to be involved in a conspiracy, not everybody can know about it. Because if everybody knows about it, it's no longer a conspiracy, it's just bullshit.
Yes.
So you're saying that the people in power in your discipline are somehow corrupt. And I'm just having a hard time with that because that's still a lot of people.
Yes.
that have to have erroneous information. Why would they do that? Do you think it's money? Do you think it's...
I mean, it could be a number of reasons. Like, some could be money, some could be threatened, whatever. Like, I mean, what we're seeing is when I look at this, and just on what the actions of what's going on, it's very evident there's some type of organized crime operating in many different areas. And we know, if we look back to like 1920 Chicago with the mafia, right? Like, they had guys that were working, there were guys that were bribed, and there was guys that were threatened, right? Like, you know, they had the protection racket, do this or else, right? And so you're going to get some combination of that. How much, I don't know, because I don't know what the personal situation is. The fact of the matter is regardless of the situation, the effect is still the same, right? You'll have to obviously investigate to figure out what the level of the active participants who was being blackmailed and coerced, as opposed to who were the willing participants and pushing this forward. But what I can sit down and say is that when I look at the actions of what's being happening, I have to say that that there is some criminal elements going on, and they're allowing criminal activity to occur, because I also, in the documents that I provided and the couple of reports, I have a document from the CDC, that I pulled from a chemical engineering document that demonstrates all of these things that they talked about as pandemics, like monkeypox, the Caribbean Congo fever, the H5N1 or whatever, this new avian flus, and all these different things like Ebola and all these things are all being weaponized for aerosol transmission. And this was in 2022, early 2022, late 2021, for aerosol transmission in level 4 labs. So when they said that monkeypox was only spread through person-to-person contact, they were lying to us, because they were weaponizing this previously for aerosol distribution through the same delivery system that I had mentioned before. And so this upcoming stuff can be spread through the same way as well. And so when I look at this, and I look at all the steps that were taken to suppress this information when I brought it forward, what it tells me is that it's more than likely probable that they have a biological weapons program, and that they were concealing the delivery system so they could effectively spread those biological weapons and then continue to push things like the vaccines, which we're seeing horrific side effects from a lot of people.
So what you're saying, in a sense, is like gain of function. Like, if monkeypox is only in nature transmissible human person to person,
yes,
then you gain of function it, or you weaponize it, so
yes,
that it can actually be spread as an aerosol.
Yes.
And that's what gain of function is in one sense.
Absolutely.
Right, right.
Or creating, like, I mean, like, I was looking at some of the research with doctors, and they were creating things that just did not exist in nature, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I look at this, and they're putting this out in their research, I'm like, what are you going to say? They're telling you right there that this is it. And I put a pile of that research into the documents that I submitted for criminal complaints, that I put in to the different state and provincial governments for petitions for redress, outlining all of this criminal activity. Mm-hmm. And then the research that supports it, and then the work with a lot of the doctors that have been outing this, information from the beginning, right?
Are you trying to create fear?
No, I mean, one of the things that I have to do inside of my work is analyze risk, right? And we have to look at, what is this possible? And if it's possible, what is the consequence? And if the consequence are people dying or there's severe harm, then how do we mitigate these consequences? And this is something that's standard. I can pull any textbook out from ASHRAE or any these engineering textbooks that deal with ventilation systems, and they teach you that you're supposed how to analyze the risk in these systems. And they also teach you that you have to mitigate for bioterrorism. This is something that is fundamentally, I can think of any one of these texts that I can put out of my office and pull it out and show you where they teach you to do this. So when I see this not being done, which is something that they, like when I took the air conditioning course in school, they drill this kind of stuff in our heads. So why are we not doing this? This is my question. Why is something that you're teaching people to do, you're not following through on it in a practical application in the real world?
So you're not trying to create fear?
No, I'm just being realistic about what I see and saying, well, this is what we need to fix it, because I didn't just identify the problem. I provided a solution for it using existing technology that would reduce the risk. It would prevent bioterrorism. It would also prevent the spread of disease and allow people to have proper ventilation so that they actually would have been able to prevent the government from locking them down by saying, hey, what you did was wrong. Here is the correct way. Now I'm following this, and I'm going to save money because it was going to increase the efficiency and the life of your system. So you're going to save costs in a very short time, and show the economic analysis of that, the financial analysis on the payback period and everything else like that. And so it's like, well, if I could save you money and prevent the government from locking you down, would you not want to come and bring your business to me to do that?
I'm going to tell you why I asked you that question. Because I know there's going to be people out there that are saying, this guy's just trying to create fear. This guy's a fear monger. He's a conspiracy theorist. And, my argument against that would be that this isn't about fear. This is about the lack of it. This is about not having to be afraid. And this is about whether or not reality and truth is unfortunate is different than creating an atmosphere of fear. So what you're trying to do, like the skeptic is the greatest optimist because he has no problem addressing the truth and mitigating a problem to bring about health and prosperity.
Yes.
Right? And so, in a sense, it seems to me like that's what you're doing.
Yes.
Right.
It would have saved a lot of people a lot of money, a lot of heartache, and we would have been in a far better situation had this been implemented from 2020. We would have never got to the vaccines, because when you look at the death rates of this disease, which was never designed to be lethal, it was designed to do something else, but it seemed to have a stacking effect with the vaccines, because the more you got the vaccines, the sicker you got from COVID, and you could go back and get another vaccine. Well, this would have been prevented, right? You would have been like, okay, this is fine. We got through this. Let's move on with our lives, right? We wouldn't be here 4 years later going, well, let's get your 8th booster that doesn't do anything.
Right.
Right?
And yet, there's still a debate around that, even though as far as Pfizer and all these other places are concerned, I mean, the head of Pfizer came out and said, of course we didn't test for transmission. Of course we didn't. We were working at the speed of science. It's the first time I've ever heard that term. As a matter of fact, I would like it better if the individual would have said, we're working at the slowness of science. That would have made me feel better than the speed of science. Because science should be taken very methodically and very slowly and very carefully. And yet Pfizer themselves said, we never tested for transmission, right? With the vaccine. And so, but there are still people out there contesting. Of course, there is data coming out now, and I think that it's clear to the average individual that not all is what was purported. You get the vaccine, that's it. You can't transmit it. Well, that was bullshit. And we know that. And that came from a lot of institutions. So I think that, just to put a cap on this fear element, I don't think anybody is trying to create fear. I think what we're doing is showing people there is concern, and there has always been concern, and that we only have history to prove that. I mean, every epoch and every eon of history proves that the people should always keep those in power in check.
Oh, yes.
Right. And it seems to me like that's all you're doing. And yet power doesn't, of course, want you to do that.
What we're seeing is a lot of abuse of power. There's a lot of people who are spending money. And when you see money and government get together, then it ends up that they're paying them to not work for you. And this is not rocket science, right? You want somebody to work for you, and you don't want guys with a lot of fat checks to come in to sway people's opinion. And then I hear about all different things that are going on. And so, if you're having somebody that's demonstrating like they're operating like the mafia did during the 20s in West Side Chicago, well, you can't have that in government. That just doesn't make sense. And if it's in government, they're going to put it in other places. And so we want to have restraint on the government. You shouldn't give the government full control on anything. Like if you go back to human history, you look at wherever a government disarmed its people, 100% of the time, genocide occurred. What should that tell you? Never let the government disarm the people. I don't care how much they make you feel good. The government should never be the ones who control all the guns. If they do that, they're going to abuse you. That's just human nature.
Right.
Don't give people the opportunity to abuse power. There always should be a deterrent there, a healthy deterrent. Not saying people should do anything wicked, but if they're going to come in and try to abuse you and you have the right to defend yourself, well, they're probably not going to do it if they're going to get shot, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. You should have the right to defend yourself from being killed. That's basic. Protect your life.
Right. And you should have an intellectual defense as well.
Well, obviously.
That shouldn't be taken away by the government.
Well, yes. The obviously going to that point is that's if they're coming down the door to come in and kill you and exterminate you for no good reason. Right? You want to prevent that long before that because, this is why we have laws and a constitution that you can use this to defend yourself. Because if you have to go down to the point of there's arms, then a whole lot of people die and nobody wins.
Well, see, what you're saying could be taken as hyperbolic, overblown. I guess the way that I would speak to what you're saying is that I think in those 100% of the times that you were discussing,
yes,
at one point everything sounded hyperbolic.
Yes.
Right? Oh, that's not going to happen. 100% of the time.
Yes.
Oh, come on, he's being silly. What a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
Right? At one point, in all of these epochs, things sounded hyperbolic.
Yes.
Until they didn't. And I think that this is what we're trying to discuss. This is why democracy is still the best of the worst, in the sense that, it's made up of two words, demos and kratos, people, rule, right?
Yes.
So the people have ownership over their own lives, over their own selves. And I think that this is what is being poked at, right?
Yes.
This level of freedom that we have had is being poked at. And of course, it's going to sound hyperbolic if you say somebody's going to come to your house and shoot you. But it's always sounded hyperbolic before it happened.
Yes.
So, I don't judge you for saying those things, because I think we're seeing the signs of it, right? And I think that this is something, especially the indigenous, I think, have always been very good at.
Yes.
Is seeing the signs of a thing, right? And, taking the temperature of their own societies. And I think that that's what we have to do, right?
Well,
and as long as we're divided, then I think power has everything it needs. You and I, like we're doing right now, sit down and start talking, then it creates fear, not in the people, or it shouldn't, but in power itself.
Well, if you hate your neighbor, you'll never see what the government's trying to do to both of you, right?
Right.
And that's really it. When I look at it, I'm like, it doesn't matter what our technology was. Human beings fundamentally stay the same. We did the same things. We eat, we lived, we laughed, we had families and all these different things. And we always had people that decided to do things that were wrong, right? And this is because people have free will choice. Now, if you give people the opportunity to do the wrong choices without having any deterrent for that, then the people who do the wrong choices will always go to the places where they won't have any penalty for making those wrong choices. So now if the government is a place where they can get in there and do those things, well, why wouldn't they do that?
That's very astute, yeah.
Well, I mean, they don't want to go to prison.
Right.
So where are they going to go? They're going to go to the places where they can avoid prison and then do the maximum amount of crime.
Right.
So this is why you want to make sure that you have deterrence for people abusing things, because you have a person that wants to go in and do wrong. You want to make sure that they're deterred from doing that and have a penalty for doing that. That's why in the States, in some of the places, they'll have harsher penalties for people who do wrong in positions of power and public authority.
Or they should.
Yes, they should.
Yes.
And I'm fully on board with that, because you're in a position where you can do a lot of harm in those positions. So if you go in there and do that, you should face higher consequences.
I just think it's very astute, what you said. So we already have established laws in place that, if you do this sort of action, something bad's going to happen to you.
Yes.
Or, you're just going to be served your just desserts for this erroneous act or this harmful act that you did. However, if the place, like society, is the place that you can do some harm by choice,
yes,
and you start to shut down those choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the harm of society becomes, of course, less, certainly more banal, but you do less harm, but you open up the potential for the place where no harm should ever be done, meaning the government, now expands its ability to do the harm of a society. You know what I mean? So it takes the place of society in the sense that there's no laws, nothing constructed for it, and it can just run amok within that space. Whilst the people themselves are so tightly packed by law that they can't even move, right? So, of course, you would want to open up that space where power exists to do the most amount of harm, not the most amount of good. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Well, and that's it. And this is why there should be an equal application of the law across the board, right? Because the law is designed to protect the innocent, not the guilty, right?
Right.
What we're seeing is that they're creating a vacuum for lawlessness to exist without penalty. And it's in positions of power, like you'll see in the government, in court systems, and so forth. Like, you're watching people do absurd things where this is deviated from the norm, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times you'd be able to call the police, somebody gets harmed, they arrest them, they take them away. Mm-hmm. But now, under certain circumstances, you're seeing this, guys are shooting people and walking out of the jail the next day on bail. Like, I don't even know how that's happening, right? Like, I've never seen this before. So you've got to look at the circumstances and going, well, look at all the things that are going wrong. Why is this happening? And why is it happening now? Right? Because it's like things were going and then the wheels fell off the bus. Right? So why did the wheels fall off the bus? You've got to investigate.
Right.
And
you got to become curious.
Yes.
Like, are people just not curious? I'm very curious. I've been a drummer my whole life. I've traveled the world playing.
Yes.
Right? But I'm curious. So you have now filed some legal action against the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of court cases. There was a lot of corruption that went on. I had a lot of personal losses, and my daughters as well, and so forth. And there's a lot of podcasts that cover that on the CARES Project and other people's podcasts that I've been on discussing that. So my daughter ended up having to go to the States because of what happened here in Canada. I sent her across because, after the first response for bringing this forward, when I reported it, because I eventually reported it to the RCMP in North Battleford in this July 3rd of 2020. Mm-hmm. After that, I got a petition for divorce hearing to settle it all on the first appearance. I also filed in court against the RCMP because they wouldn't let me bring any more information and so forth. And I had the same judge both days. He told them to keep me out of the court, and they showed up at my house the day before. I served them documents because they were avoiding court service. Shut the door, locked it, went to court the next day. Instead of they arrested me and my daughter trying to enter the court, me and my oldest daughter. And then
they arrested
the
you?
RCMP, yes.
Arrested you going into court?
Yes. The court hearing that I was going against them.
So you were going into a place of justice?
Yes.
And you weren't doing anything
no,
felicitous?
No,
and they arrested you?
Yeah, as soon as I came out of the car, like, they swarmed. Like, they came in from all angles. They swarmed us. They grabbed my daughter. They ragdolled her, threw her on the ground, dragged her away, put her in handcuffs. And so that was for being contact traced.
What does that mean?
They contact traced her at the dentist's office, and they said they were going to quarantine her.
Because?
She had been contact traced.
What is contact? Sorry.
They said that they contact traced her being at the dentist's office where somebody had a reported case or had a suspected case of COVID. And
so they threw her down on the ground?
They arrested her like...
God, I hope they were wearing masks. Were they?
It was... There's a videotape on this. It's on Rumble and stuff like that.
Well, wait a minute. They threw her on the ground and arrested her for having COVID?
They're saying that she was contact traced. But
contact traced meaning that she knew she had COVID?
They thought she might be exposed.
And she was willfully spreading it to people, or she just... I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, they said that if you needed to go out, then wear a mask. That's what it said on the documents.
Right.
And she's like, well, court, that's pretty important. And so she had a mask.
Right.
Right? But I was at the dentist, but they didn't contact trace me. But that's suffice.
But they arrested both of you.
Well, yes.
So they arrested her for having COVID. And I'm just going to put it that way because what else was it? You know what I mean? Like,
and then they said I was crazy.
So what they arrest you
They said I was crazy, right? The Saskatchewan Health Authority that were the subject of the criminal complaints. They said I was crazy, and they took me. The RCMP took me to the Saskatchewan Health Authority, where they then strapped me to a bed.
Wait a minute. So they arrested you on the crime of being crazy?
Yes, they said that I was crazy. Yes.
Okay, but what was the actual crime?
Nothing. They just said the Mental Health Services Act. But they actually didn't. They actually didn't even do it right anyway. Like I looked at the information, they didn't even follow the law, right?
In what respect?
Well, first of all, they were supposed to say the section that they used. They said they were supposed to direct me because they thought I was in need of mental health services to go and have an examination, and I'd have to refuse. And if I refused, then they could arrest me and take me in for an examination. Except nobody told me to go in for any examination. Right. Right? So they didn't.
It's like when communism, came in, the question was, are you a communist? And you say no. And they say, well, that's just what a communist would say. You know what I mean? you can't get out of this. Right? Yes. So you say, are you crazy? You say no. And they, well, that's just what a crazy person would say.
Yes. So they brought me in there and I asked them, I said, so where's, they just threw me in there. I got assaulted. It's on the video and so forth. And so then they take me in and I said, so where's the warrant? Because according to the Mental Health Services Act, they're supposed to bring the warrant in and present it to the doctor when we get in. And there's like eight or nine armed RCMP and I'm just there by myself and there's a couple of doctors. So I'm like, where's the warrant? And they're like, do you know why you're here? I said, I don't care why I'm here. I'm supposed to be going into court with you guys and them, and you bring me here. So where's the warrant? They have no warrant. So I kept asking for the warrant, and they're like, I'm sick of them. Just take them away. So RCMP, they take me, they strip me, they strap me in bed, and they start drugging me. And then as I was being drugged, I was interrogated about the very information that I was taking them to court over, and I filed the criminal complaints. Yes, that's torture. You can't extract information from somebody while drugging them, especially when they reported you for that same crime.
Have you ever seen a warrant?
They gave something much later, but that wasn't there at the time, right?
And it has to be served at the time, doesn't it?
It has to be.
They have to present it.
They have to present it. That's what the law says, that they're supposed to present it as they bring me in.
Right.
Yes, and they never had it. To begin with.
Right.
Yes.
And so this isn't logical.
No.
Because if they have a warrant, they would issue the warrant, you would see the warrant, and they would pick you up because your daughter's got COVID and you're crazy.
Yes.
If they don't, and that's how the warrant would have to it would have to specify that.
Yes.
Right?
Actually, making matters worse, they had a warrant, the RCMP had a warrant for resisting arrest on July 22nd, 2020, for the arrest that took place on July 23rd of 2020.
And this was in the parking lot at the courthouse.
Yes.
Okay.
So the day before, when they came to my house,
Yeah.
they had a warrant for resisting arrest that day for the arrest that took place the next day. That's impossible. Resisting arrest is a reactive crime.
Right, so they had a pre-existing
Warrant for resisting.
warrant for the 23rd when you were going to
Resist
resist
the next
arrest of
day.
the 23rd, which you didn't do anyway.
Yes.
So that's like a thought crime.
Yes.
Can we say that?
Yes. My sister, she used to work for the RCMP in the K Division.
Yeah.
She's like, those men should be arrested because what they did is a crime. She's in one of the videos where she's actually says, what is this, the Minority Report?
Right. Right. Well, what else is it?
Right? Yeah. Like, oh, he's going to resist arrest tomorrow, so let's issue the warrant today.
Right.
Right?
Right. And I work a little bit with AI, and I know it's not that smart.
Well, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just nonsense,
Yeah.
right? So, and then I looked at the occurrence reports later when I got Freedom of Information requests. These guys made up horrendous stories that didn't even match the truth. Mm. So when I look at it, and then I got the Freedom of Information request from the Saskatchewan Health Authority, or the eHealth that we're looking at, the mental health center. Well, they also said that they brought me in on the 22nd when it was the 23rd. So
to match the warrant.
Yes. Yes.
But physically, in all reality, it was the 23rd when you.
Well, yes.
When they picked you up. Yeah.
Yes, and then in the occurrence reports, they even had to say that the arrest took place on the 23rd. But then it also says that the court directed them to keep me out of the court on the 22nd. Right? Yes.
But you weren't going to the court on the 22nd.
No, but it was going on the 23rd.
Right.
So then you can see that the court,
right,
the RCMP, and the Saskatchewan Health Authority were all projecting together to keep me out of court the next day.
On the 23rd.
Yes.
Right.
Because they're all saying that to keep me out of court, and then they had all these things lined up on the 22nd,
right,
and that they're all discussing. That is, on the criminal code, that's called conspiracy.
Right.
Yes, that's a crime.
Yeah, but let's not forget you're the conspiracy theorist. I mean, that's heavy shit.
Yes.
Like that's extremely heavy. And I know, well, obviously, I mean, you've just laid out a few things of which you've suffered at the hands of this, and at the hands of a government that's supposed to protect you from this.
Yes.
Not do it to you.
Yes.
But to protect you from it. Now, I want to ask you this.
Yes.
Because, I asked you about the fear thing.
Yes.
Because I know that's one thing people say.
Yes.
Right? And other people say, well, you're part of this big complex that makes a lot of money from this kind of shit.
Really?
These kinds of lies. Oh, come on.
What?
Come on.
I'd like to see
on.
some of that money.
Dollars. Dollars. So I want you, just for the sake of it, are you making anything off this interview?
No.
No. Have you really made anything from any of this? Have you lost more than you've gained?
Well, let's see. Okay, my 4-year-old daughter, while I was strapped to that bed and getting drugged against my will, like the judge was dealing with both matters. So I was cut off from my 4-year-old daughter. I haven't seen her. She's 5-year-old daughter. I haven't seen her for 4 years. I lost the house that I was living that was taken, and they said that I could sell it and get rid of it, the house that I was living in. The corporation that had its registered office there, because my ex and I were separated, she was gone. My daughter was renting this basement suite in there. So all the intellectual property, all of my possessions, everything was done. They committed fraud, like the court, my ex, the lawyer, like signed documents like they were me, and transfer the title using the Land Titles Act instead of the Family Property Act, which is not permissible. Like, I mean, all of these things, and I lost everything. right?
Mhm.
So I haven't profited in anything. And then on top of it, trying to fight for myself and my daughters, I mean, that's cost me probably, well, I mean, over $200,000. I just really no other way to sit down and say that I profited anything, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
But that is going to be said about you. You know that, right?
Well, of course they are.
Right, right.
Well,
That the truth isn't the truth anymore. You know, that you're making money off of what is in all reality complete suffering. And so you can't be doing this for any other reason. And this is, you know, I'm going to do my own series on this as well.
mm-hmm.
But there is one marker that you can use to purport trust in another individual. Now, it's not complete, but it is one marker that shows you whether or not somebody is telling the truth. And that is whether they have something to risk or something to gain.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person has something to gain, then you want to look deeper into their motivation.
Yes.
But if someone is immediately going to risk, you don't really have to look any further into motivation,
mm-hmm.
right? Because no one would risk for no gain. The
Yes.
only reason that they would risk is out of a sense of what true virtue is and a sense of the moral, even the natural moral, the
Yes.
morality of nature itself,
Yes.
right? And it is for that reason that I, wanted to get together with you and talk to you.
Yes.
Because I know that not only have you not made anything off this, but you've risked many things, and
Yes.
you have only hurt because of your integrity. And that is one way to show that a person actually does have it, because they're going to be damaged by it, but they can't do anything different than speak the truth.
Well, when I first saw this, my first thought was my little daughter could die.
Yeah.
And someone's little daughter could die, or their loved one could die. Right? And I'm like, I can't allow someone to die. Right? Like, I'm like, first of all, I have an obligation with my job. But first, even before that, I believe in God. I can't stand before God and allow people to die, knowing that this is going to harm someone, and then think that this is okay. That's nonsense. It's like, if we're all God's children, right? This is what I believe. Now, if somebody went and started to kill my children and expected to come to my house, you think I'm going to let them in?
Right.
So why do you think I can go ahead and kill God's children and expect to go into his house?
Well, you have to bind the strong man first. And in a sense, isn't that kind of what this is about? I mean, you're no slouch. You're a big guy anyway.
Yes.
But what is big is integrity. Right?
Yes.
What is big is a sense of the moral.
Yes.
Right? And so you have to bind the strong man. And I think in a sense that it can also apply to that.
Yes.
So you have to, because what is, weakness is going with the crowd. Weak is
Yes.
believing what other people, the status quo, what everybody else believes.
Yes.
Not being skeptical, right? Not having any sense of curiosity. The binding the strong man means binding a guy that is willing to risk it all because he simply has to. He simply has to tell the truth, and he can't not do it. That's binding the strong man.
Yes.
And in a sense, that's, I think, what's happening with you.
Well, absolutely, because if I have the right to life, you have the right to life. If I stand there and watch them take away somebody's right to life, that means I consent to my right to life being taken away, and I consent to yours. That's the way liberty works. If you take liberty away from one person, then none of us have it. We all have privileges. It's only a matter of time till we're out of the favor of the people who are saying we have privileges until they take it away.
Right.
Right? So...
And they don't, this is the whole thing about government, is that they should never have access to our privilege.
No.
As a demos, as a people.
No.
Right? I mean, our privilege is our own, and it's our rights that they are only instituted in protecting and never, ever taking away from. We already, I think, have the laws we need to solve 99% of every problem we have.
Yes.
Right? And if we don't, we're stupid. Our governments have been stupid since the day they were enacted. If we're a 200-year-old country, and at this point we have to keep enacting law because we still don't have it right, no, we're good. We got that right. We got that settled. We don't need to start taking away new rights. right? And if we do, then we're just not smart people. We haven't done that hard work.
Yes. You know, and I agree with you on this because, like, and I like the way that the Americans say this because they're right. They're like, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So if you're not exercising just powers, then you're not the government, right? You're tyrannical, right?
Right.
So when we have laws, the law is designed to protect the innocent. More than saying that they need to protect rights, this is how the government takes away your rights. They say, okay, well, this group needs rights, right? So we need to create more laws to protect their rights. But then in doing so, they take rights away from everybody else. Everybody gets less rights to begin with, right? Because we all have rights. All we have to do is enforce the laws that people have their rights and protect them. We don't need to take all the special interest groups or everything else like that because...
And give them anything special over their natural right. So, here's what you're saying is that we have natural right. We are granted natural right by either nature itself or by God.
Yes.
Right? We're granted those natural rights. No one gets less rights than that, and no one gets more rights than that.
No.
So the special interest group is very interesting to me because what it's saying is that somehow we're above nature. So we need more rights than nature actually provides. And that is completely against the way the world works. What you have is natural right. And anything beyond that, you don't get because no Homo sapien gets it.
Well, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't harm another person.
Right, which is a natural right.
Well, yeah, my liberty goes as far as the next person, and vice versa.
Right.
So as long as you're not taking away someone else's liberty, do whatever you want.
Right.
That's the way the law works. If you don't break the law, then you're free to do whatever you want.
Right. And if people want to say, well, I'm a dude that wants to go into women's bathrooms, or because I somehow seem like I'm a woman, well, I don't think science is there yet. Now, if in 100 years we prove you to be correct, this mentality that you have is actually correct scientifically and biologically and psychologically, I'm willing to accept that. But that's not today. That's 100 years from now. Now, whether or not you're ever going to figure that out is another question.
Yes.
Whether, and what I'm saying is that you need to accept that now isn't that time, and in 100 years you could be proven wrong.
Yes.
Are you going to accept that? Now, you're not going to be around, but whoever is around, we're going to have to, they're going to have to accept what reality is. And reality at this moment is not that, and you can actually do more harm by allowing that to take place, as we've already seen in, like guys going into women's institutions and bad shit going down.
Yeah, people getting sexually assaulted.
Right. And so I'm all for science proving this, right?
Yes.
But if it don't, you got to accept it, And because we don't have the science now to prove that, we're not going to institute laws that science and what we know is as a part of the moral doesn't allow us to do by nature.
Yes.
We're not going to do it. If it comes to the point where we're wrong, we'll accept it.
Yes.
If it comes to the point where you're wrong, you must accept as well. This is democracy.
Yes, and this is where you have to sit down and see, okay, well, a man may want to go into the women's bathroom because he believes he's a woman. Mm-hmm. Well, you still have a penis. Mm-hmm. And you take that penis out, you're going to put it in front of what? There's women in there. Mm-hmm. There's also little girls in there. Mm-hmm. Well, should they see your penis? Mm-hmm. You know what that's called? It's a crime. You're exposing a child to something they shouldn't see. Mm-hmm. And women don't want to see some penis of some strange man. Mm-hmm. That's just not the way it works. Mm-hmm. You go out in the street and show your penis to somebody on the street, and they're going to arrest you.
In a tribe, there would be accountability one to another, that if that ever, everything would be in the open anyway. So if you wanted to risk that, you would also risk your life.
Yes.
You see what I mean? In a tribe. But you don't do that now because we are so separated as a culture,
yes,
one from another, and we are so individualistic. And this is why I believe that the future, as far as I'm concerned, the future of music, art, the future of the species is local. Right? Now, I don't mean 15-minute city, although I don't not mean 15-minute city. I just don't mean 15-minute city in the way the left has set it up.
Yes.
What I mean is that because I know my brothers and sisters in art, right? Like people are
Yes.
suffering, man. Nobody's making a dime, and they're not living.
Who's making money? Almost nobody.
Well, almost nobody now, but it certainly started with an artistic class.
Yes.
We could see it probably more the declination of society
Yes.
better than anyone else, and or at least no different than anyone else was seeing it at that time. And I believe that that there is an opportunity to be in smaller groups of individuals and have everything you need. But if you're going to take away individual rights within that, see, this is what we were talking about before, right? The difference between collective and individual. And there's a nuance there. Sometimes you're individual. Well, you're always an individual, but sometimes
Yes.
you exercise that individuality, and sometimes you exercise collectivism, right? It's a nuance that really a child knows.
Yes.
And yet somehow our society doesn't know it. Somebody in the States said, rap is local. Rap is coming back, and it's going to be local again. It's not going to be about the ballers and all the bling. It's coming back, and it's going to be local again. It's going to be in our hands, which I think is what you and I are saying about everything.
Well, yes, because it's like, for example, when you have smaller business, right? Mm-hmm. When you have these multinational corporations, you have somebody off in some office tower in some place that is far away from you. There's no accountability, right? When you went to your local grocery store or your local business who was installing your drywall or whatever, your name was important in how well you did the work because you were accountable to the people that are around you. Mm-hmm. So if you did shoddy work, well, guess what? Nobody's coming to you. You're out of business. So there is more of, when you're accountable to the people around you, it is easier to get better quality of work and people being fair because then you have that direct accountability. Once you start distancing yourself between people, and then you have these bureaucratic processes, then you create all of these barriers for people to get justice. And when you're looking at this, the government can get this control because they're disconnected from the people. Mm-hmm. Right? And the way that any type of free country is supposed to work is that the power rests with the people and it comes from the ground up.
Right.
But now they've tried to create this bureaucracy that came in from communism that we knew never worked, mm-hmm. that they tried to exert a top-down control. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if it didn't work in Russia, mm-hmm. why do you think it's going to work now here when we had something that worked better? And we're going to go something that we knew didn't work. Mm-hmm.
Right. And don't you think that one word, accountability, is really one of the biggest factors I think we're plagued with, whether we think about it or not, right? At least unconsciously, we are plagued with the fact that if we don't want to be accountable one to another, then we probably need it. You see what I mean?
Yes.
Like if it's something that we are so opposed to, it has to be that it might actually be the best thing for us, because those who are not accountable, I mean, nobody in government wants to be accountable. The only way that they're held to account is by the demos, by the greater amount of people themselves, the civic population.
Well, it's like people think, well, I never want to feel pain. It's a bad thing. I'm like, really? What happens if you never was able to feel that your hand was burning on the stove, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you get near the stove, it's hot, you pull it away. Mm-hmm. Don't touch it. But if you didn't feel that, how many of us would be in a whole lot of problems? Your arm would be broken, you wouldn't even realize it, right? So pain is a good thing because it lets you know not to do that. And so we need to have consequences, and consequences both good and bad. You should be rewarded for doing the right thing because there should always be good consequences for making the right decisions, and there should be negative consequences for making the wrong decisions.
Right.
This helps your decision-making process. And when you're a parent and you have children, you try to let them feel the consequences of their actions. Hopefully you make sure that it doesn't kill them, but at least they get enough of that consequence to learn their lessons so that they can start assessing and making those better decisions on their own. And this is what we're seeing is being taken away from us as a society. The decision-making process of people is fundamentally flawed. People want to do what they want, but they don't want the consequences. And they're doing things to avoid the consequences, and certain elements are allowing certain people to avoid consequences for their actions. That is not the way any society can function.
Right.
There has to be consequences,
Right.
both good and bad.
And in a sense, we are the people, the society is the conscience of government. So we're the ones that say, don't touch that. You're going to get burned.
Yes.
And they go, I'm not going to get hurt. And you go, no, you're going to get hurt.
Yes.
You don't do that. And that is the power the people have. And the day that we actually start to believe that, and I mean again, because we did believe it,
Yes.
and we've lost it. And the day we start believing it again is the day that we start hating each other, and we collectivize and we come together and we provide either the power to the government or the lack of it.
Yes.
And when that happens, well, I don't know, then things get better. Then musicians start to play again. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Then society starts to blossom and bloom once again.
Well, we were never designed to live like this.
Never.
Right? Like, human beings, yes, even the people that will consent, they can only get pushed so far until they just can't take it anymore, because we were never designed. Yes, some of us are meant to be leaders, and some people are to follow, but the leaders are supposed to set the example, the right example, to help the other ones who to follow, because not everybody's a leader. We can't. We're not designed that way. But the leaders have the responsibility to set the right example, so that the people who are more on the following side would follow the good example. Right? Because if you have good leadership, people will generally follow the good leadership. If you have bad leadership, some people will go along with that, right? And then eventually they say, okay, this is too much. And what we want to do is to make sure that we set the accountability for the people to restrain them, so that when things go wrong, we don't have to have, like, this is a complete dumpster fire with gasoline being poured over by like 100 people. Like, this is not sensible.
It's all accountability. If things were as you say,
Yes.
then when you went to the head of the engineering department,
Yes.
he would have said, I hear you, brother, and we need to do something.
Yes.
Because I'm accountable to you. But instead he said, shut up, go away, and don't mention it again. That is antithetical to the way nature, human nature itself,
Yes.
is underpinned, and it's the foundation of it. It's antithetical to it. Look, I don't want to keep you here all day. And actually his mom has been right off camera here, and she was just the most patient and from what I know of her, the most beautiful woman I've ever met. But I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you because, we got into some stuff, right?
Yes.
All sincere stuff, but this really comes down to the heart of man, woman.
Yes.
You see what I mean? It really comes down to how much we're going to love, how much we're going to take responsibility, and how we're going to move on as a civilization. And I don't believe that civilization will allow us to move any further until we get some things right.
I agree. Like, at a certain point, every one of us has a choice.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, I'm like, I want to choose to do right. I believe in God, and God says to do right. And he says, you love me and keep my commandments. So what do? I love my neighbors myself. So if I don't want wickedness done to me, I shouldn't do wickedness to someone else. Like, that's just common sense. And there are some things that were common sense that I thought were common, but you need to believe in God to understand these things, right? Like, don't kill someone, right? Don't harm your neighbor. Don't steal. Like, these kinds of things should be, like, these are not rocket science.
Right.
And we got to this situation where we've been deceived. And now we've got to come back, and we need to come back to the drawing board and say, how did we get here? Ask these questions and so forth, and move forward. And a lot of it's going to be forgiving your neighbor because he was deceived and so forth.
Yeah.
But we have to fix this. Otherwise, there's going to be nothing left for our children. We'll have no future here.
That's right.
And so we have to start making right decisions. And like I sit down, if you were deceived, that's fine. Just fine, admit it. We're all wrong. None of us are right 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But don't double down on it because you think that you need to continue on because you want to be right.
Right.
I'd rather know the truth than to be right.
Yeah.
right? Because if I don't know the truth and I'm doing something in error, then I'm harming someone, right? Because if I'm doing the wrong thing, believing I'm right, then I'm going to harm people, and I don't want to harm people. And that could be your loved one, that could be your child, your your wife, your husband, whatever, your parents. Do you want to do that? No, right? I don't want to believe that I'm right, and then say build a bridge and how it collapse and a bunch of people lose their families, right?
Right. Well, and like we already said, in any other situation, you would be vilified and probably jailed for doing such a thing. And now you were praised to do the antithetical, to do the worst job that you could do. You were praised for that and told to shut up for doing your job.
Yes.
And there's something fundamentally wrong. I want to shake your hand because you're a good man and you're a strong man, and don't hurt me. Where can people find you? Where can they?
I'm at DJS Richardson on Twitter, Truth, and Getter, and we do me and my daughter do the CARIS Project.
KARIS?
Yeah, CARIS Project, yes.
Okay.
And it's on Rumble, Twitter, I guess now X, and they're on True Social, Facebook, and a few other stuff. My daughter's the one who does the social media stuff. I'm not as technologically savvy as she is.
Hey, at least you got somebody to help you. I do it all myself.
I can engineer systems, but I cannot run apps on the phone.
Yeah, that's right. I tell somebody I can play the drums for you, but I can't change your rock. So let's just get that straight right now. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and we'll see you again.